What is the truth about dynamics? Well, if you look at a piece of music, you'll see dynamics written by the composer. You'll see things like forte, piano, mezzo forte, subito piano, suddenly quiet, things like that. And these are very important instructions from the composer. They give insight into more of the character of the music. Less about what these notes are and more about how you want this music to sound. How do you want it to come across? What are the affects behind the notes? So these are really great things to notice. You want to take note of these dynamics and you want to do them and you want to study them and you want to figure out how to bring them out more. But if we only think of dynamics in like a tier fashion, like, well, there are 5 different levels of sound, let's say, and I'm going to shoot to develop my technique so that I can accurately produce sound at each of these different dynamic levels. You can definitely gain a lot of technique in this study, but I don't think that has yet scratched the surface of the truth about dynamics. So I always go back to this phrase that I heard my teacher say in a class one time. He said, "Music without dynamics is music on life support." And it's something that I wrote down and it's stuck with me ever since. It's the most accurate statement about dynamics I've heard. And it's one that I use to define my own dynamic approach. So, picture someone on life support. Are they alive? Well, technically, but I'm picturing someone, that's in a coma or something like that, not conscious, hooked up to a respirator, and not at all able to live life in any sense of the word. So they're technically alive, but in all other ways, they are not alive. So music with no dynamics is music on life support. It's there, technically it exists, but it has no life. And if there's one thing we should shoot to give our music, I believe, no matter what kind of genre of music you play, it definitely should be life. Something that has life just does its own thing for its own reasons. And something else just observes that life. You just see it happening. And you can understand there are reasons for this, even if you don't know what they are. It's just the definition of life. It's happening, and you're observing it. It's happening before you. So, if music without dynamics is music on life support, then I believe the opposite is also true. The more dynamics you give music, the more life you give music. So, here's the truth that I believe about dynamics. It's that if you believe in the power of dynamics to give music life, then it is impossible to play a single note without dynamics. Dynamics are not a tiered formula, although they may be presented that way, at a certain point in someone's studies. But if you continue to study the concept of dynamics, the dynamic flow is an infinitely divisible set of effects that flow through you. It's like you can take these so-called, 5 tiers of dynamics and slice each one into an infinite amount of pieces. Now you're beginning to work with true power of dynamic affect. And I don't think we're always conscious in terms of, well, I'm going to reach for this one tiny, infinitely defined slice, and I'm going to use only that little slice. I think we reach and get as close as we can. And if we feel the power of dynamics flowing through us, then it's very relative, if you're going to play 3 notes in a row and each note is going to be a little bit louder than the one before it, then that's going to be relative. Your decision, your little slice that you reach for the first note is going to affect the slices of dynamics for the next 2 notes to build on what you want to do. I remember the first time I think I realized that my mental approach to dynamics were to just let them flow through me and to let each note have its own dynamic. And I can't remember what piece I played, but I remember I was playing something for my teacher. And when I was done, he said, he was giving me feedback, and he said, well, I really liked the tone colors that you used. And immediately my mind said to myself, just in my mind, it said, what tone colors? And then I immediately started to think, did I use tone colors? And then I thought, and I'm a very, paranoid type of person, so this is normal mental activity for me. But I started to think, is he saying that I need to use tone colors because I didn't use any? And I was confused. And on reflecting upon that later, I decided that no, it wasn't like reverse psychology. He was giving me feedback, and he had observed something functioning for its own reasons. In other words, I think I had begun to let some of these concepts flow through me, and it then became natural, and it was just the way that the piece was. And that's why I didn't feel like I had used any tone colors per se, because I had used more than you can really think about, because every single note maybe was beginning to have its own purpose, So I think that's a feeling that you get when you allow dynamics to flow through you. Every note really has its own dynamic, and you couldn't possibly put on the page of music, on your score, all the dynamics that you are going to use. Probably for 2 reasons. One, you wouldn't be able to read it because it would just be so full of markings. 2, no composer can tell you all these infinitely divisible dynamics that you will want to be using. They can tell you big general things like forte. They can even give you specific effects like subito forte, subito piano, triple forte, accents, things like that. But if you're going to play 180 notes in a piece, all of those 180 notes have their specific inflection. And that just comes from wanting to explore dynamics and how they function and how you can get in touch with that and letting them flow through you. So if you believe in the power of dynamics, it is impossible to play a note without them. It is synonymous with playing a note, because every note that you want to play, you want to give life. Or it may not be worth playing. It may be hard to find a reason to play a note if it is not showing signs of life. So these are just my thoughts on dynamics. If you want an exercise to work with these things, head over to the A Guitar community. I have an exercise that I give to students. Really nobody does it, but it's my favorite exercise in terms of, how do you explore all these infinite levels of dynamics? How do you even begin to find, dynamics between and within other dynamics? Well, I have the best way that I know how, so I'll show it to you there. Or if not, I hope this just gives you some information to think about dynamics differently and to learn how to give your music more life.